Imagine you're flying a perfectly capable airplane toward a mountain ridge.
Okay.
Your engine is at full throttle, your nose is pitched up for a climb, and yet you are just falling out of the sky at 1,000 feet per minute.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right, because the physics of the Colorado Rockies, they really do not care about your engine power. And they certainly don't care about that glamorous, like, Hollywood image of aviation, with pristine wings and smooth sailing above the
Oh,
clouds.
definitely not. I mean, the terrain dictates literally everything up there.
Exactly. Up there, the margin for error just evaporates. Flying becomes this gritty, intensely mathematical, three-dimensional chess match against nature.
It really does, because when you introduce 14,000-foot peaks and, the totally unpredictable thermodynamics of mountain weather into the equation, you aren't just managing an aircraft anymore.
Right, you're dealing with the environment.
Exactly. You are managing an incredibly volatile, fluid environment. Gravity and air currents are just actively working against your intended flight path.
Which brings us to our mission for this deep dive. We are opening up the August 2026 edition of the Colorado Pilots Association Flightlines newsletter.
A really great issue, by the way.
Oh, it's packed. Our goal today is to unpack the hidden physics of mountain flying, the very real political battles that are threatening the tarmac beneath those planes, and, the totally unique community events that make all this stress actually worth it.
Yeah, the payoff.
Right. We've got white-knuckle survival mechanics, massive air hubs going completely dark, and a literal wildlife safari. Forget this. Thousands of migrating tarantulas.
Which is just wild to think about.
It is. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the literal life and death physics of navigating the Rockies.
Yeah, so the newsletter features this brilliant breakdown by Don Dubin. It's called Flying the Colorado Rockies, Practical Tips and Tricks. And he establishes right away that the standard playbook, the one that keeps a pilot safe in the Midwest or along the coast, is essentially a trap in the mountains. He points out how relying on IFR instrument flight rules can actually backfire for piston aircraft in the Rockies.
Because, well, the minimum en route altitudes in that airspace are hovering around, 16,000 feet?
Yeah, right around there.
And a standard unpressurized piston single is going to struggle just to climb that high, let alone have the performance margin to maneuver safely if things go wrong.
Exactly. And that's not even mentioning the human factor.
Right. Mandatory supplemental oxygen.
Yes. Plus the severe risk of structural icing if you get into the clouds at that altitude. It's incredibly dangerous.
And if you try to fly below the peaks, on an IFR flight plan down in those canyons, you are dropping entirely off air traffic control radar.
They just can't see you.
Right. So counterintuitively, staying VFR, maintaining visual contact with the terrain, is actually your safest bet.
It totally forces the pilot to read the environment rather than just staring at a screen. Don brings up this vital threshold regarding the wind. He says if the winds aloft blowing across those mountain ridges exceed 30 knots, you just keep the airplane tied down on the ramp.
Just don't go.
Do not go. And think about it, 30 knots is only about 34 miles per hour.
Which is, that's just a breezy afternoon on the ground.
Right. But over jagged terrain, it completely transforms the air into a chaotic blender of mechanical turbulence.
So I was actually trying to visualize that invisible turbulence. And I think the best way to understand mountain wind is to picture water flowing over rocks in a river.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, because if you've ever navigated whitewater, the water doesn't flow flat.
Right.
It slams into a boulder, it accelerates over the top, curls behind the rock, and creates these massive swirling eddies. It generates violent hydraulic jumps or these severe downdrafts right behind the obstacle.
That analogy perfectly captures the fluid dynamics at play here, because air is a fluid. When a 30-knot wind hits a mountain ridge, it gets forced up the windward side, creating this massive updraft.
Like a ramp.
Exactly like a ramp. But as it spills over that jagged peak, it tumbles down the leeward side like an invisible waterfall.
Wow.
And if your small plane only has a maximum climb rate of, say, 700 feet per minute,
Okay.
and you inadvertently fly into a leeward downdraft, pushing air toward the ground at 1,500 feet per minute,
Oh, wow.
the math is definitively against you. You are going down.
Which is exactly why Don's methodology for crossing a mountain ridge is so crucial. You never fly perpendicular straight at the rock wall.
Never.
You always approach at a 45-degree angle.
Yeah.
Because if you hit one of those invisible waterfalls of sinking air while flying straight at the ridge, turning 180 degrees to escape, that just takes too long.
Yeah, and it uses up way too much forward space.
Right. You'll sink right into the granite. But at a 45-degree angle, you only need to make this really shallow turn to dive away toward lower terrain.
Hmm.
But you're preserving your kinetic energy and your options.
And he applies that exact same spatial geometry to flying through the valleys, too.
Oh, right.
Because the instinct for most pilots, and just human nature really, is to fly straight down the middle of a valley.
Yeah, putting equal distance between the rocks on the left and the rocks on the right. Makes sense visually.
It does, but Don points out that flying in the middle actually robs you of the turning radius you need to execute a 180-degree turn.
If things go bad.
Exactly. Like if the valley floor rapidly outclimbs your aircraft, or if a weather system suddenly caps the pass up ahead.
So you have to hug one side of the valley to leave yourself the full diameter of the canyon to turn around.
Yes.
And you can't just pick any side, right? You have to identify the windward side where the air is rushing up the rock wall, surfing that invisible thermal elevator, rather than getting caught in the leeward sink on the opposite wall.
What's fascinating here is how all of this completely flips the script on what it means to rely on technology in the cockpit.
How do you mean?
Well, we have an industry heavily focused on advanced avionics, right? Synthetic vision, moving maps, highly capable autopilots.
Yeah, it's incredible tech.
But in this specific environment, all of that data is secondary to the pilot's ability to actually read the physical atmosphere outside the window.
I do want to push back on that a bit, though.
Okay, sure.
With all these modern glass cockpits, why is pilotage and visual judgment still trumping the autopilot's magenta line in these canyons? I mean, a GPS shows your exact position relative to the terrain with pinpoint accuracy.
Mm.
And you have an autopilot that can seamlessly follow a magenta line on a display straight to the destination waypoint.
Mm-hmm.
With all that processing power, can't the system just calculate the safest route?
It's a fair question, but the thing is, the computer knows exactly where the rock is, but it has absolutely no idea what the air is doing around the rock.
Ah, I see.
An autopilot tracking a direct GPS course will blindly fly you straight into a catastrophic downdraft if that sinking air happens to just sit on the magenta line.
Wow, so it's literally flying you into the waterfall.
Exactly. A mountain pilot has to look at the shape of the terrain, visualize that river of air you described earlier, and intentionally fly off course, abandoning the GPS line to exploit the lifting air and avoid the sinkholes. The safest path through a mountain pass is rarely a straight line.
That dynamic maneuvering makes descent planning sound like an absolute nightmare.
Oh, it gets complicated.
Yeah. Don discusses arriving at his home airport in Salida, Colorado identifier Cankai. And he notes that you might cross a mountain pass just 4 miles from the airport, but you're still sitting at 13,000 feet.
Right.
The airport elevation is much lower, so you need to dump thousands of feet of altitude in just 4 miles. And you can't just push the nose down, or you'll exceed the aircraft's structural speed limits.
Right. You have to bleed off that potential energy without gaining excess kinetic energy.
Yeah.
So pilots use a feature on their avionics called the blue banana, which is this projected arc on the screen that continuously recalculates where the plane will reach its target altitude.
Based on ground speed and descent rate.
Right. Exactly. But again, in a confined canyon, you can't just follow the arc in a straight line. You have to figure out where the valley is wide enough to safely fly in descending circles, all while dodging opposing traffic and avoiding that leeward sink.
And even if you manage that energy perfectly, right, and line up for the runway, you are still dealing with density altitude.
Oh, the silent killer.
Yeah, Don flags this as one of the most deceptive traps for a pilot. Because the air in the mountains is so thin, the pitot tube, which is the instrument measuring the ram air to calculate your speed, is taking in fewer air molecules.
And that aerodynamic reality completely warps the pilot's perception on landing.
How so?
Well, to generate the same amount of lift in thin, less dense air, the wing has to move much faster through the air mass.
Okay.
So while your airspeed indicator inside the cockpit might show a perfectly normal approach speed of, say, 65 knots, your true airspeed over the ground might be closer to 80 or 85 knots.
Wow. So you touch down on the asphalt carrying significantly more forward momentum than your brain or your sight picture is expecting. The rollout feels uncomfortably fast. The brakes are way less effective because of the higher ground speed, and it just eats up a massive amount of runway. I mean, the critical thinking for that landing really has to happen long before the tires ever touch the pavement.
It demands an incredibly high level of situational awareness, that's for sure. But, you know, as intense as the physics are in the air, the newsletter makes it pretty clear that surviving the downdrafts doesn't mean much if the infrastructure on the ground is collapsing underneath you.
Yeah. Which brings us to a major pivot in the flight lines reporting. because the airspace isn't the only thing trying to push pilots out. The ground infrastructure is basically doing it too.
Yeah, it's a huge issue right now.
There is this stark notice to air missions, or NOTAM, regarding the Colorado Air and Spaceport, KCFO. Due to severe controller staffing shortages, the facility announced an ATC 0 status. Until at least late August of 2026, the control tower is entirely closed on weekends and shuts down at 6:00 p.m. on weekdays. So what does this all mean? How does a pilot safely operate an aircraft into a major air and spaceport on a Saturday when the control tower is literally just an empty room?
Well, the whole system just reverts to uncontrolled airspace protocols.
Okay.
Pilots switch to a Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, or CTAF. So instead of a centralized controller sequencing the arrivals and departures, it becomes this decentralized, self-organizing system.
Sounds chaotic.
It can be. Pilots have to continuously broadcast their positions, their altitudes, their intentions. Operating at an airport of that size without a tower requires a hypervigilant mental map.
Right.
Every pilot is simultaneously flying their aircraft and sequencing themselves with unseen traffic.
It's a symptom of a much broader infrastructure strain, really.
Yeah.
And it perfectly frames the advocacy efforts led by CPA President Andy Holmes.
Yes, his opening letter was very telling.
Yeah, he highlights the intense grassroots battles happening right now at Boulder, Longmont, and Centennial airports.
Oh.
The newsletter includes reporting on a major situation at Centennial involving the AOPA, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. They're stepping into a legal dispute over soaring hangar rents.
Right, because the underlying issue at Centennial is the rapid gentrification, so to speak, of aviation infrastructure.
Yeah.
The AOPA is intervening to advocate for fair rates, and they are leveraging FAA grant assurances as their primary mechanism to fight the rent hikes.
And AOPA is really bringing in the heavy artillery here because FAA grant assurances are legally binding contracts.
Absolutely.
Since Centennial, like a lot of these airports, accepted federal taxpayer dollars for upkeep, paving runways, installing lighting systems, they are legally obligated to keep the airport accessible for public use on fair and reasonable terms.
Exactly.
They can't just price out the local general aviation community with these extortionate hangar rents just to cater exclusively to ultra-wealthy corporate operators.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it demonstrates the fragile economics of local airports.
Right.
Taking public funds means you forfeit the right to operate purely as a ruthless private enterprise. But without organizations like AOPA and the CPA fighting these battles, local municipalities face immense pressure to either price out small aircraft or rezone the land entirely for commercial real estate.
And the state government is clearly trying to balance this tension. The newsletter outlines the release of the 2025 Division of Aeronautics Annual Report.
Yeah, that report was interesting.
It really heavily emphasizes state investments in sustainability, including the transition to unleaded aviation fuels and funding for infrastructure upkeep.
They recognize the economic engine that these airports provide, but it requires constant grinding bureaucratic maintenance.
Even down to the CPA's own internal administration. They recently transitioned their membership directory to a strict opt-in model, requiring members to manually authorize their information to be visible.
Privacy is a huge concern now.
Yeah, it just highlights this pervasive need to build defensive layers, whether protecting privacy or fighting hangar rents.
It really forces you to ask. With the grueling math of mountain descents, the unpredictable weather, the closed control towers, and the endless town hall meetings, why do they do it?
Right. That is the ultimate question. We've looked at the intense survival mechanics and the ground politics. Let's look at the payoff.
The fun stuff.
Exactly. The reason pilots endure all this friction is the unparalleled access it grants them to hidden pockets of the country. Take Bill Marvel's recap of the recent fly-in to Lincoln, Nebraska.
Oh, yeah.
They landed at Duncan Aviation, which is this sprawling, highly secure facility where they rip apart and rebuild multi-million-dollar corporate jets.
Yeah, it's massive.
But Bill specifically notes that the linemen at Duncan treated a pilot stepping out of a 4-seat Cessna 172 with the exact same level of respect and urgency as, a CEO stepping out of a Gulfstream G5.
And that egalitarian culture is a total cornerstone of the general aviation community. The airplane is a great equalizer on the ramp.
It really is. And the itinerary in Lincoln highlights the fellowship aspect, too. They toured the Museum of American Speed, which is this massive archive of drag racing and automotive history, visited the 400-foot tower at the Nebraska Capitol, and even stood underneath a B-1 bomber at the Strategic Air Command Museum.
Incredible.
And they capped the night at a restaurant called Showstoppers, where their server, a theater major named Hattie, belted out songs from a stage while serving dinner.
It's a shared cultural experience. I mean, they use their own machines to bridge a massive geographical gap just to break bread together.
Right, but I mean, a museum tour in Nebraska is relatively normal. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Brett Polmainville organized an upcoming September fly-in to the rural town of La Junta, Colorado identifier KLHX. And the stated mission of this trip is a wildlife safari to see Colorado's Big Eight.
The Big Eight.
Yeah, not the big 5 mammals in Africa, the Big 8 legs.
The tarantula migration.
Yeah, every September, thousands of male Colorado brown tarantulas march across the Comanche National Grasslands.
Wow.
They take years to reach maturity, and they have this one brief, frantic window to find a mate before winter hits. And the town of La Junta leans into this completely with a massive tarantula fest.
That is hilarious.
So the CPA pilots are flying in, heading to Otero College for a tarantula talk with leading arachnologists Dr. Paula Cushing and Dr. Kara Shellington, and then taking a coach bus out to the grasslands at twilight to watch giant spiders look for love. And I mean, have to play devil's advocate here.
Go for it.
Wait, so pilots are flying incredibly expensive machines, risking mountain downdrafts, just to go stand in the grass at twilight and watch giant spiders look for love.
This raises an important question about the true utility of general aviation.
Right.
Because it is far too easy to view a Cessna or a Piper simply as a tool for transportation to bypass highway traffic.
Yeah.
But in reality, the airplane is an exploration engine. It connects incredibly isolated rural economies like La Junta to a much broader demographic. This town took an obscure, slightly creepy biological ticking clock and transformed it into a celebrated economic driver.
It turns the aeronautical chart from like a two-dimensional piece of paper into a living, breathing ecosystem.
Yes, exactly.
You aren't just flying at 10,000 feet over the grasslands on your way to a major city. You pull the throttle back, you land on that rural strip, you learn from the local arachnologist, and you integrate into a microculture you would have otherwise entirely ignored.
And it entirely validates the intense preparation required to operate in the Rockies.
Oh, absolutely.
The discipline required to manage a blue banana descent profile or avoid a leeward downdraft, it's simply the price of admission. The reward is experiencing the world with that kind of unfiltered clarity.
It really is a remarkable way to interact with the world. To bring this deep dive to a close, let's just look at the immense territory we just covered from the pages of Flightlines.
We covered a lot.
We analyzed the unforgiving fluid dynamics of mountain winds and the deceptive physics of thin air. We examined the bureaucratic friction of dark control towers and the vital grassroots machinery fighting to keep public airports accessible. And we saw how that gauntlet of preparation pays off in the ability to access singing waitstaff in Nebraska and, of course, migrating tarantulas in the Colorado plains.
It really highlights how aviation is a microcosm of managing complex, dynamic systems.
Exactly. And that is exactly the takeaway for you listening. While our focus today was squarely on aircraft, the core principles here, intense preparation, defensive posturing in complex environments, and the power of community advocacy, they apply directly to whatever turbulent systems you navigate in your own life.
The discipline of a mountain pilot translates to almost any high-stakes environment.
Which leaves me with a final thought for you to chew on. It comes directly from Don Jubin's masterclass on mountain flying.
Oh, good.
He wrote that the golden rule in the Rockies is to constantly ask yourself, where's my out? You never fly blindly up the exact middle of a narrow canyon because you rob yourself of the radius needed to turn around.
Right, you always hug the wall.
Yes, you intentionally position yourself on the edge, hugging the windward wall, so that if the environment turns hostile, you have the maximum amount of space to reverse course.
It's brilliant.
Think about how that applies beyond the cockpit. If we adopted that exact same hyper-vigilant, always leaving out mentality to our own lives, our career trajectories, our complex relationships, our heavy financial commitments, how would it change the way you maneuver through your own predictable turbulence?
That's a really good question.
Do you tend to fly straight down the middle of your problems hoping the weather holds? Or do you strategically position yourself to ensure you always have the room to turn around? Something to think about.